stands
I
for
Polybutyl
exactly A.
polybutyl.
acetone.
I'm gonna die because there's so much
acetate?
toxic shit in this.
I heard it does things to your feet.
You guys are funny.
Tom, what happened to the big bottle?
All right.
Yes.
It's so loud.
You got to dance.
Okay. I don't hear the music. Wait, you got to kill the AC. Hey everybody, today is July 9th. We are here recording. Adam's on remote because he's at home with foot surgery. Today we're going to have our first live call-in. And before we get started, we're going to have Gary give us a little catch-up on what's been going on.
A little catch up. So I think we've brought up before that I have a side business selling shirts. Currently, it's a front business. Is that what you would call it when it's no longer a side business? A front business?
Sure.
We're going to call it a front
Well,
business.
a front also has some very negative connotations.
It's like
Well,
money laundering.
Oh, a front. Yeah,
Primary.
yeah. Well, of course. You don't report any of it. So I just went to a large expo this weekend. And before I explain how well or not well that went, when I started a business, a lot of it was figure just say yes to everything and then figure out what you can and can't do. I wasn't going to grow. You can't grow with a business if you don't try to do new things. So like I know when I got my first large order, someone says, hey, can you make 800 shirts? I'm like, sure. And it was a large amount of money that I put up front to buy all the shirts and everything. And then it came back like 6 months later, can you do 1,700 sweatshirts? I'm like, it was like over $10,000 I had invest and hopefully no problems, but say yes and, get it all done. And I've had times where I have people ask me if I can sell at their event and it's the same week and I already have something going on. I'm like, yes, and we figure it out. So I figure I always say yes, see what I can do. So this weekend I've always said I want to see what I can do if I go to an expo to sell custom shirts at an expo. And this is the largest 15K in the country. It's about 40,000 runners. And the guy who I know up there wanted to know if I'd partner with him to sell shirts. And I said, sure. It did not go well. If it's the only event I've ever done where I lost money. But the only real reason I lost money is because, I had to drive 4 hours to get there. I had to pay for a hotel for 2 nights. And all the expenses just to be there outweighed all my expenses or all my profits that I made, which was not a lot to begin with. So it was not a success, but I tried. And I know next time if I want to do it again, either don't do it or new plan.
But hang on, like a couple nights in a hotel and gas money, like that's not enough to, like you had to have no sales. Like,
Well, my
what was
expenses for being there were about $500.
Okay, but if you're going to be there at an expo for a weekend, I would expect you to make a lot more than that.
It sucked.
So what was it about it that didn't
Volume?
produce?
Lack of
Oh,
volume.
I didn't sell a lot. Partially it was not promoted the way I would have liked. There was a lot of social media. They had stuff on their website. They did email blasts. So we did have people come and say, hey, I heard you do this and want to get it done. Like we put names on shirts. We can customize their shirts or the ones they buy from us. But I was set up in a spot where if you didn't know what I was doing, it was very hard to tell what I was doing. So we did decide if we do it again next year, we have to have a much better presence so people actually understood what it was.
Right.
Well, that's kind of good because even though it wasn't a financial success, it was success in the terms of learning, right? What to do in the future,
Listen,
what
if you're
not
going
to
to have
do.
a business, you're not going to know. Like I could have said no and never know. But I've also had a lot of times where I could have said no and lost thousands of dollars of profit. So, it's okay. I learned and I know next time what needs to be different or if I want to take it on at all.
Cool.
If you don't mind me asking, what other avenues are you, now that you have the time and you're looking to boost this forward, what are you looking for in the future? To be able to do anything different than running or?
Well, I've reached out. I did like a swim event last year and it went really well. And I'm trying to get more into it, but it's not an easy thing from what I do. And I've had a conversation with Ray. It's all relationships. I've asked a lot of people and I get a lot of no's, and there's no reason why there's a no. They're not doing anything at all. They only make money. But it's not until I either get to know them or through somebody who I already know who convinces them to let me do it. They're like, yes, we should have done this to begin with. But more outreach, more not just events.
So knocking down doors, marketing.
Yeah, and I got to talk to your niece about the whole cheerleading thing, because that's another.
Oh, it's a huge
Avenue.
avenue.
Yeah.
But I think it's the same though, right? You have to know someone in that.
Got to know
niche.
somebody.
I mean, I guess one thing is when I was at this event, I ran into somebody I know, and he sees what I do, and he says, I go to a lot of soccer tournaments. And he says, I'm going to hook you up because they don't have people doing this, and I could do well there too. So I might have not made a lot of money or lost a little bit of money, but this can turn into making a lot of money, for something like that. So we'll see how it goes.
Gary, I think, very well stated. And Ed, I agree with you. It's about the lessons learned. And look, you didn't, lose thousands and thousands of dollars or anything. The lessons learned are probably well worth it. And I'd just like to underscore the main takeaway that I got here that applies in almost every situation. It's about relationships.
Yeah.
And you just kind of highlighted that here. And the only way to build them is to get out there and do what you did.
That is right. Okay. Awesome, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. And now we are going to cut over to our Q&A, which is going to be live for the first time. So on the line and on our screens, we have Tom Canning. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, everybody. Good
Hello.
afternoon.
How you doing, Tom?
So Tom,
Good, man.
Tom's a former coworker of mine who got saddled with a whole bunch of work when I left. And he's still smiling, so I guess everything's okay.
So, definitely.
Yeah, just wait, Ray. He's going to take it out on you over the next 60 minutes here.
So Tom had a whole bunch of questions, so we figured we'd have him on once instead of calling in a bunch of times. So Tom, tell us before we start, where are you from? Tell us, a microcosm of who you are.
Sure. So, Tom Canning. I'm born and raised on Long Island on the South Shore. My parents still have a place down in Oak Beach, if you're familiar with the old OBI from back in the days. I grew up about half a mile east of there, which is about 10 miles east of Jones Beach, if you're more familiar with that. Going to be 38 next week. So
Happy early birthday.
that's great. I
When I
got
was
two
your age, I was
kids.
35.
two kids. My son is Liam. He's going to be 5 in September. And my daughter Abby is about a year and a half old. And as you heard, I stepped in to fill Ray's very big shoes with other very big shoes of my own.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tall joke because I'm 6'7". So I'm very
Holy cow!
So you're like two Rays.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta show you. I'll find the picture of me and Tom.
Two rays.
Yeah.
my team, formerly Ray's team, but my team now lovingly refers to me as Little Ray because they think that that's still funny. But yeah.
Still funny.
Awesome. All right, Tom. So take it away. Let's have a question.
All right. Well, I will start with when I started working with Ray, which I got to work with him for about 2 years. He was always telling us, "Oh, I'm going to retire one day. I'm going to retire. You guys have to do this. I'm going to have to retire. I'm going to retire." And I never thought it would happen, and then it actually did. But in the short amount of time, I learned a lot of Ray's, I guess, philosophy, and I've been trying to impart that on my own. But one of the big things I would ask you guys about is leveraging credit, specifically for daily spending, like using debit cards versus credit cards. I have a personal belief on how I think, we use it. My wife and I try to consolidate all our spending onto a card that has a rewards program. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think about it.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Number one, if I've got the option, credit over debit, it's credit all the time without question. Because for really two reasons. One, I'm getting points, and whether that is a You Promise fund 1.5% for Liam and Abby, or frequent flyer miles or whatever, you're getting points. The only time that may not work out is paying gas these days. A lot of times when you're fueling up, it's more cost effective to pay cash for gas.
I'm going to
despite-
disagree with that because my card gets 4% back on gas.
Okay, there you go. Some cards even beat that.
Yeah.
And then in times where interest rates are a little bit higher than they are now, you're delaying when you actually need to pay that credit card bill. This theory is all well and good, but unless you're able to pay that credit card bill in full on time, it can also be a recipe for disaster.
So, anybody else have a different opinion on this as far as using credit cards, getting the points, getting the cash back?
No, but I think there's one option there that because I think the last thing that Adam said is the most important thing. You can get yourself into some trouble if you do that. You know, then you're floating this money and not getting the benefits. But I think the biggest one is, at least the way I've been explained and the way I've experienced it. Let's say that you go to Europe or you go on a vacation or you do something with a debit card. Someone either takes that number and uses that card. They just took your money. Now you got to go to the bank and defend that with them. Whereas if you use the credit card, you use the credit card's money, and they are very quick to defend you. And I've experienced myself both ways. Jennifer and I got our identity stolen. They took a whole bunch of stuff, and the debit was one of them. And it wasn't a process that I lost, but it was cumbersome. Mm-hmm. Whereas not 2 months ago, they took $100 on a gaming program that little Stevie knew the name of it. And immediately, in 2 seconds, they gave me the credit. They went after him. They found out who it was.
Second one was your credit card.
The credit card, yeah. Exactly. So I think one of the things is safety purposes, and you're using someone else's money, which goes a long way.
So I had never thought about that until the last 6 months or 4 months maybe, but we know 2 other people that this has happened to in the last couple of months, and totally agree. Like, I never want to use a debit card ever again for that same reason, right? It's just straight door access to your checking account, right?
Yep.
So I have no reason to use it. I'm probably just stop carrying it around, like maybe just for emergencies.
That's my number 3 go-to, 2 credit cards and 1 debit just to be on the safe side.
Yep.
I think it's important that since we've had these discussions before, I think it's better to use your credit card if you know how to use it properly and not go over your budget. So if you can only afford to spend, let's just say $2,000 a month based off of your income, then set your limit to $2,000, your credit limit, to have a credit card set, so you can't go over that. Because if you're not able to pay it month after month, you're going to pay a lot more money. So it's important to make sure you're not going over.
Agree.
I'd also like to throw in something here that hasn't been around for at least 15 years, but everything goes in cycles. This opportunity will come back, and be ready for it. In 2005, for a few years, there was a time where you could get credit cards with balance transfers and not have to pay anything back for 6 months, right? So what I was doing, and I think, Ray, you were doing this too, you'd get a card, pull out 10, 20K in credit, as much as you possibly could, throw it in an interest-bearing account, which at the time you could get 4 to 5%. And then at 5 months and 30 days, you pay the credit card off in full, and you just made that interest for 6 months. Now, granted, it was kind of a lot of money to throw out there to make, $400 or $500 each time. But those opportunities are there. And again, it comes down to just running the numbers, being on top of it, being willing to do a little bit of extra work, and being handy with a spreadsheet helps too.
Spreadsheets are always good. We're gonna get a new spreadsheet jingle, Adam. So you gotta wait for it today.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Just like that. Yeah.
That was a good one.
You could just do it on your own.
I know.
All right, I think we're done with that, Tom. Unless you have other questions or
No. That's really that aligns well with what I usually do. I mean, the only thing I would add is that, like, we bank with the same company that we use our credit card with. So rather than waiting for the bill to stack up, what my wife and I will do is we'll just make smaller payments. If we spend $200 on dinner one night, we'll just, when we get home, send a payment for $200. It's like literally just exactly the same as using your debit card.
Yeah.
This may sound stupid.
But
I didn't
now-
know you could do that. I figured you have to pay it off
I'd say-
all of it at once.
I'd say there's nothing wrong with that, but at some point when your checking account is getting more than 0.02%, that's the advantage. Let it ride, pay it all at once on the due date. But
Yeah, that,
So
now, yeah,
So why don't you
It's
just
probably
branch
not worth
out branch out on that, right? So in our Capital One accounts today, the checking account gets 0.0 whatever on it, but the preferred savings account gets 4.3. So we have all of the money in there, and then we just pull it over to the checking account to pay bills, right? So if that's the case, that would actually be a preferred way to do it. Tom would leave it all in an interest bearing one, and don't pay them short term like you are. Wait till the end, leave it as long as possible, and pay it and
That's a
get
great
the
idea.
interest on the way.
quick follow-up on that. Are you paying taxes on that interest? Or is there a way to shelter that?
Is that a loaded question? Because I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, you're gonna
Capital
have
gains,
to.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else.
Well, you
would
get a
do
statement
it.
from the bank at the end of the.
You get a 1099 INT form,
Yeah,
and that's your
Right.
capital gains. Yeah.
and you're not going to pull it. out of
I
the
haven't made enough
qualified
interest
funds.
in like 15 years from my bank because you need it. It's got to be at least $15. I mean, I have a lot of money and you get 0.01%.
Well, that's because it's in your checking account.
Yes.
You got to put it in one of these other ones.
Yeah, well,
And Adam had brought up a good point about everything being cyclical. I mean, now, talking about interest rates, banks are now offering CDs that are now between 5 and 6%.
Yep.
Which are better than I bonds, kind of, sort of, getting real close.
Getting close.
FDIC insured.
That's right. All right, Tom.
all right. So I'm not as close to retirement or not ready for retirement quite yet. So I'm still definitely in the rat race. So I was curious to hear what some of the tips are for how to make it in that 9 to 5 until you get out and branch out or retire or do something else. I've heard you guys talk about you have your 9 to 5 and then you have to do something on the side. I'd like it for my 9 to 5 to be as lucrative as possible, obviously. So what are some strategies that you guys would say to get promoted, to when to take risks, when to take on new projects, when to take on different pieces of work to increase your ability to earn?
Who wants to go?
I'll start on this one.
Go ahead, Ed.
So I think from my perspective, from my life experience, one of the key things I would say is the outlook on what you had just said is rat race. There is a board game that we played several times with our kids called Cash Flow. And it's interesting because every time we play that game, everyone's, jockeying to win. I got to get this, I got to get that. And what I try to make a point to my kids is on the board, there's a spot where you give. And I said, when I play, you guys are trying to win. I'm trying to win enough money that when I come around that spot on the board, that I can give. And so I think the perspective of the rat race is certainly a perspective a lot of people have. But when you're looking at things that try to lead towards fulfillment, things that you'll enjoy, right? Now we're looking at a different perspective. So for instance, I do work extra jobs. And one of the extra jobs I work is an adjunct professor at a local college. But I was sharing with a lot of the fellows here in the podcast is when I go there, that day at work is very much like the field trip at school. I'm still going to work, just like when we were kids, we had to go to school. But that field day, boy, you couldn't wait to get out to that school bus because it was something different. And for me, I love it. One day I may not, and in which case I don't want to do it. But I think seeking your fulfillment in terms of what you do and not looking at things at a rat race makes a huge difference. It has in my life.
Absolutely. What would I say? You've got to be able to take the risks. If you want to move up, move on, if you wanted to change careers, to do something that you love instead of the rat race thing you're doing, like there's always going to be a risk there, right? And trying to figure out when to take make that change, and is it okay? Is always a little bit. There's always a little bit of struggle. So I can tell you that all the jobs that I've had, and I moved up with each one. Salary was higher with each one. More responsibilities were higher with each one. Most of them were unintentional, right? Like I wasn't looking to do it, but somebody came and said, "Hey, you should go this. You should interview for this position. We're doing this. We're doing that." And I remember thinking about it a lot and saying, "Well, if I do this and it's more work and I don't like it, I'm going to be upset. Why did I do?" Like the whole like second guessing thing. But in the end, and other people have told me the same thing. You just do it, right? If somebody gives you an opportunity, you just do it. Right? Because for the most part, they're offering opportunities because they think you're capable of taking it on, and they're expecting something bigger and better from you, right? So if you don't take those opportunities when they're offered, then you're going to have to go out looking for opportunities, and that's different, right? Because now you're like it's the Wild West, right? There's a million job openings. I got to go look for something, right? If someone comes to you with something, you should seriously consider them. I can tell you one that someone offered me, and it was when Devin offered me the actuary job way back when, and I took it. And it was a disaster, and I turned around and left 3 months later, right? So it does.
But you tried.
But I tried, and now I know what actuaries do, so I learned a little bit. But that was the only time where it kind of didn't work out. But I would say that you've got to, and I have a skewed view of this because I know where you work and all that kind of stuff. You have plenty of opportunities there to make changes, right? So you should be meeting as many people as you can. Relationships are the big thing, right? And we went through that before. And those relationships will get you those other positions and those other responsibilities, and you'll feel more comfortable about it because of the relationship part. Adam, got anything? Did we lose Adam?
He's
You
moved.
got me. First, quick question for Tom. Do you love this job? In which case, why are you trying to get out, or is early retirement a goal?
So I actually do really like my job, which is funny to say, especially to Ray, since it's before. But no, I really do. I've been enjoying it. I just think that I don't know that I love it. It's not a passion of mine.
Which
it's
is
interesting
which is
to me.
common, though, I would say.
Yeah,
You said it. That passion word. You said it. I think on a previous episode we noted that maybe 20% of folks find themselves in a career that really is following their bliss. You use the words of Joseph Campbell, or in line with their passions. I get you sound like you're in the other category where you like your job, you find it fulfilling, it's rewarding, but not necessarily your spiritual mission in life. So in that case, as Ray said, you're already in a good position. You're not necessarily looking to put your resume out there. So my advice is to always say yes. You're never, ever going to be fully 100% ready for that next position because you'd already be there if you were, right? You're never going to be ready for that next step. You just got to take it. Two other things. In conversations with clients, peers, colleagues, superiors, think about exactly what they want to hear from you. And then think about, well, how close can I actually say that? How close can I actually get to that and still back it up? And if you're there for that sole purpose of, getting out, which sounds cynical, but inherent in that is doing an awesome job, making yourself valuable. And what better way to do that than give people exactly what they want, as long as you can back it up. The third and final thing I'd say here is on deadlines. First of all, unless you can point to it on a clock or a calendar, it doesn't exist, and it's not going to happen. Those are the 10 seconds of value I got from a 16-hour project management course 20 years ago, but they were worth every hour. That's it. When you're given a deadline or you accept a deadline, there's only two real options. One, you deliver on it, or two, there's advance warning of why you're not going to deliver on it. That's all I got.
So, Tom, I have a quick question for you. When you started this new position, you've been doing it for what? I guess 3 months, 4 months.
Yep.
Did you have a little bit of imposter syndrome?
Oh, I still have it. Still have it every day.
It's a normal thing. I found every time I got a new position, I'm like, I don't belong here. Even with my side job, I'd go to these places. I'm like, when is somebody gonna tell me you can't be here?
You don't belong here.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. This is not, you're an imposter. You're taking somebody else's job. It goes away. And then you went like a year from now, you're like, I don't know why I ever felt that way. But it's common. But for as well, something else to do, because it sounds like you want to keep your job. You're looking for something to invest in somewhere else,
yeah.
other than just regular stocks and things like that.
Yep.
And I know your job based off Ray's time consuming, so you're gonna have to do something where it's less time, like property. So you might have to invest in buying a property.
As opposed to a side business.
Yes, because that's going to be time consuming. Unless the side business is something like I'm going to get, people hire you to get things off the top shelf
Well, I think we're
because
actually
you're 6'7".
but right, we're starting a podcast, but we are bleeding the question a little bit. So part of the question was the rat race part, right? How do you be more successful in the rat race and continue to progress and all that kind of stuff, or in your career? If we don't say rat race, right? And the one thing I will say that on top of what Adam was saying, Tom, is that when promotions happen, there's a lot of discussion in those sessions about who should be promoted, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but the question always comes up: is this person already behaving in the manner that this promoted position would expect them to be?
Exactly.
Right? And if they are, that's one more checkbox to say, well, then why aren't we promoting them, right? So that's what Adam was saying. Always say yes, just make it happen. And the imposter syndrome thing is true, right? Like just because you think it doesn't mean it.
So, just go on what you said. I know I've worked with a lot of people who are below me and said, I'm just here till I can get to this position. And I'm like, but you suck at this position. Why would anybody want to move you to the nether position? Like, be good at this one before you think about moving on.
Right. But they probably picked that because it's like a salary level or something else or some prestige thing, right? Not because of their skill level. They're just saying like, I want to
move up.
I
Yeah.
want to move up. Right. But yeah. And look, like a lot of places, your income and your salary is dependent on the role, right? Like you're in bands, pay bands and stuff, right? We can't give you a raise anymore because you're at the top of the band. You've got to get promoted. Well, what do I got to do to get promoted? And then you've got to either take more responsibility or become a manager of other people, or there's all these other reasons that you've got to play that sort of game in corporate America. But I would say, from what I know, you're on the right track, right? Because the change that we made a few months ago for you was a big deal, right? So that's the way to go, but you got to keep doing it, right? So when somebody calls you in a year from now and says, hey, I want you to go do this role, you may not, what you don't want to feel is guilty, like, oh, I just started this job a year and a half ago, maybe should I not leave yet, right? But if it's an internal thing within the company, like that's fair game, right? Like people do that all the time, right? So don't be afraid to change.
I think one other thing that I'd throw in there, Tom, Adam mentioned the statistic about 20%, and you had mentioned you may not necessarily love your job, but you're very happy with it. It's a good job. That may change in the future, right? Mergers happen, restructures happen. Sometimes things open up and you may find yourself in a different position in the future, but you tell yourself, boy, I really love this now, right? But it's because you're doing the job that you feel good about and that makes you happy now, and ends up maybe it leads to a job that you do love, and you are on that 20%.
That's right. Or you go find the job that gets you into the 20%.
Yes,
right.
You can do that too.
The grass is not always greener.
Right. Okay. Bring it on. What's next?
So I've heard you guys talk about HSA, and I have 2 young kids. My son is, basically a COVID kid, went to pre-K for the first time this year. We were in the doctor's office constantly. So my health expenses are high for them because everything that my son gets my daughter. So I know that you guys have talked about the HSA and how you use it. My, problem is like, do I really want to put that much money into the HSA to be able to fund all the co-pays and things? Should I drop my health plan down to the worst case scenario plan and then contribute more to HSA rather than pay the premiums? Like, what do you guys think is the best thing for, somebody with a young family?
Anybody else have HSA besides me? Adam?
Adam shaking his head.
Nope.
Okay.
And I have no kids.
No, I do not. I dabbled with it, but we had very low expenses, and this was when it first came out. The additional burden of managing the receipts and paperwork wasn't worth it at the time, but I understand that's gotten a lot easier over the years. So we are taking another look at that too. But Ray, I'm sure you've got more current info on it.
I was very excited when it came out. I thought, something that we could definitely benefit from. But unfortunately, I don't know what your situation is there, Tom, but you have to have the high deductible health plan in order to qualify for it. And we just simply didn't have that.
Correct. Right. So if it's not available to you, it's not an option.
Yep.
Right. So it is available to you, Tom, right? So just to back it up, so HSA is a health savings account. And what they've said is, look, if you are willing to go into the high deductible medical plan, right? So in your case, it's plan A, plan B, plan C, and you got to go to plan C, right? And the deductible was probably several $1,000s, $3,000, $4,000, right? If you're willing to go there, then you can open up this health savings account. You can put money into it, and it's just like a 401k or an IRA, right? So the money goes in tax-free, the money grows tax-free, and when you take it out, it's tax-free, provided you use it to pay for medical benefits, right? So it's the best of all the investments. It's better than an IRA. It's better than anything else.
What if you
as
don't
long-
use it? Like, let's just say it builds up to $100,000.
So we'll get there. So that's the only caveat, right? You got to use it for medical. So what it turns out is that the timing is easy, right? So you put the money in now and you pay your bills on your own and you leave this investment account growing, and you can pick, mutual funds and stuff to let it invest. And you get to take that money out in the future whenever you want to use it for medical plans. It could be next month, it could be next year, it could be 10 years, right? And the plan stays with you. It doesn't stay with your company, right? It's your personal plan. So the bottom line is, in 20 years, you could have all this money piled up in there that's been invested, and you can say, oh, look, I got to pay for my new hip because I broke my hip. And then you can take the money out, and then you can use that receipt. So you didn't need receipts. You don't need to track all the time. You've just got to do it right. The other thing you could do is flip the time. So if you had a medical expense in 2023 and you kept the receipt for it, right? Then in 2029, you could take the money out and claim that receipt from then and say, look, I'm paying back for this thing that I did 6 years ago.
Did you have to have your HSA at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you can take the money out and go buy a car, right? Like, so it's just a swapping of time and money, right?
Can you use it for somebody else in your family or only for you?
It's for whoever's covered in the health plan
Okay.
that you're on, right? So the flexibility is there, right? So it's not like you can say, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to use this in 10 years because I have a different situation. Like, it doesn't matter. So yes, you should keep your receipts somehow electronically. It might be the best way, but paper copies is always good. But I personally think it's great, right? And we've been building it up for all these years as basically a retirement health plan for us.
But if you're going to have a higher deductible, what's the benefit of getting you're paying more money to do it?
Well, there's a little bit of math there, right? So a higher deductible means a lower monthly payment into your health plan.
Well,
Right?
I mean, where I was, my health plan payment was so low that why would I ever want to do that?
And maybe that's true, right? So everybody's got to do that math for themselves, right? But for us, when we looked at mine, we looked at Waze, and do the math and say, look, we don't go to the doctor that much. We don't have that many bills right now. The kids were not sick that often. So paying a few co-pays, paying for some stuff, like, it wasn't a big deal.
So you're basically saving, let's just say you save $2,000 on having a lower, you're paying less money to your monthly payment.
Your monthly payment,
but,
right.
But you're going to have a higher deductible. It's a wash, roughly. But
Right.
now you can have easier way of growing your
But you can
tax-free
put
money.
$7,000-ish, I guess,
Yeah.
per year now into that account, right?
7,300 as of 2022.
There you go.
According to
What happens if you
healthcare.gov.
spend more than that? You can't put more?
No, it has nothing to do with there's no in and out. It's nothing to do with your spending. Like, if you have the plan,
You're only
then
allowed
you can
70
invest 7,000, just like you can have whatever the limit is for an IRA, whatever the limit is
Yeah.
for a 401k, same thing. So it's just basically saying, like, oh, I already hit my limit on my 401k. I already hit my limit on an IRA. Here's another way to put tax-free money aside and invest and leave it there for the future, right?
Okay.
So to me, I think it's great. And it really comes down to, are you comfortable today paying your bills without some of the extras, right? And paying some of those deductibles if you have to. And then if you are, you can push it off to the future and take the tax advantage then. You look stumped, Tom.
No, so I mean, I guess the interesting. So you would say that you would just leave it in there basically forever, right? Like you said, that's your long-term, retirement health fund or something like that,
Correct.
right?
Like, we don't have a job that's going to give us like retirement benefits after we leave, right? We don't have
Right,
a pension type thing. So to me, it's kind of a supplement for that.
Right. Okay. No, that's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, like I said, my problem is that we're constantly at the doctor. I think I put a couple $1,000s in the HSA this year, blew through it within a couple of months, with God knows what, the kids are bringing home. But no, that's very interesting. I didn't think about it that way. So maybe I got to change my plan now. I don't know.
If you have the extra cash, right? Then it's just a trade. Do you want to pay it out of here? Or you want to pay it out of there, right? But I like
Right.
the triple tax-free, functionality of it is better than anything else.
Yeah. No, very interesting.
And I told Megan the same thing. She should do that too. Megan was a coworker of ours who might be listening today, actually.
I'm
Hello,
sure she
Megan.
actually already texted.
All right, so
One more thing on the HSA, according to healthcare.gov, keep in mind that although you can use it for copays and deductibles, in general, you can't use the HSA funds to pay for premiums.
to pay the
Right, in
premium
general, you
itself.
can't.
Right. It's got to be for actual medical use.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, that was a good one. Bring it on, Tom. What's next?
So I feel like everybody in America is a little bit financially illiterate, and I think that's why I like listening to your podcast too. So I want to be able to give my kids some of that financial literacy. We've opened 529s for them. I'd like to be able to teach them about the stock market. What are some ways that you think that you could that I could teach my 5-year-old about compounding interest, or what the stock market is, or any of these kinds of things to make him learn the value of a dollar?
Go ahead.
Sure. So I think of a few things that sort of are foundational to what you just asked, Tom. In some of our previous episodes, we talked about the importance of discipline and a lot of other underlying character traits. And I think those baseline foundation things that you teach your kids are vastly important, not just for what you're trying to teach them financially, but just general character for life. I think when our kids were younger, my wife and I really started simplistic with a chart. And we started the children on allowance based on their age. The little older one got a base allowance a little bit higher, the younger one a little bit younger, but as they reached the same age, they could also earn the same amount. Along with the chart and their base allowance, they all had the opportunity to increase the amount. And I wasn't really sure if it was getting through to my kids until one time we were at the dollar store, and there's this little magnet action figure that one of my children wanted. And the child came up to me and said, "Dad, I really want this toy." And I said, "Oh, we told you to bring your allowance money. Did you bring it?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I brought it." He said, "But I'm saving mine. I don't want to spend mine. Can you get this for me?" And I thought to myself, this is great. How wonderful is this? So I said, "You know what?" I said, "You brought up a great point." I said, "I'm glad to hear you're saving that." And I said, "You know what?" I said, "I'm saving mine too." And then he's asked me, the child said, "So what am I supposed to do?" And I said, "Well, now you have to choose, right? Whatever you're saving it for versus how important this is to you." Right? In this case, that child decided to buy that. But then later on, I think it was like a couple of days later, they wanted something else. And I said, that's the trade-off.
Buyer's remorse.
Right. So I can't say that, I necessarily started them, at that age, elementary school, talking about stock markets. But I think a lot of the small baseline values, right? They have to make judgments. They have to choose. And unfortunately, like many other aspects in life, they have to face the consequences and reap the rewards, both the good and the bad. Just like we talked about in a previous episode about learning to ride a bike.
Yep.
Right? Good and bad. Either way, we accept it and move on and learn from it.
Yep.
I think you need to use real life experiences for them. I think if you can explain to them, but I think they need to see. And there's a lot of things that I learned growing up, and so did my brother, but apparently he didn't take the same thing out of it. But I know when I was born, or when my grandparents, when they had their grandchildren, each grandchild was born, they bought them a stock. And I remember when I was old enough, my father would show me the statement and say, when you turn 18, you can do whatever you want with this. But he'd show me a statement. He said, "See, now this thing, it keeps growing. Now it's split. So now you have twice as many you had before." And he explained to me what was going on. I'd see this. And I remember, like, when my brother turned 18, he's like, "I'm selling it." And I turned 18, I'm like, "This is doing great. I'm going to put money." I didn't have a lot of money, but I'm putting more money into it. And I had that stock for 35 years. And I saw it growing. And it was something that I got to see from young until I got, to be an adult. And it definitely helped me understand the stock market and things growing, things like that.
So Johnny just got back. So
I do apologize. Someone was at the front door.
the recap is you should have had your app working so you could let him in. I understand.
Trust me. Nikki was already there. It's my assistant with all the twins and the daughter.
So the question we're on now is how do you get your young kids? He's got a 5-year-old and younger. How do you get them up to speed on like financial literacy, just understanding the value of money and stuff like that? So Gary just talked about his experience.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think you don't know me, except that I grew up with Ray, but I also do not have any kids. But I helped.
But you were a kid once.
Yeah, I was, and that's why I wanted to say it. But also, we've been very active in taking care of my cousin's kids from birth to they're all in their 20s, early 30s, children, educated. And I think the one thing, which is a general comment but lends itself to finance, you have to keep kids busy. I think every generation can attest that if you keep a child busy and you're occupying their time with productive stuff, and one of those things as part of the pie has to be finance. So personally, I don't have children, as I said, but also growing up, there wasn't direct instruction for finance. There was only an example. The only example that I saw was my mother. My mother was just very proactive and just constantly telling you have to save money, have to save money. She was never very specific. She just always referred to a time that was coming that was, we're all going to pass hunger, right? She grew up in Puerto Rico, extremely poor. She knows what it is to have absolutely nothing. And she was just repeating what her grandmother and her mother told her. Listen, hard times are coming. Make sure you prepare for them, right? But because this generation coming doesn't know what hard times are and probably won't even come close to that definition of hard times, you're just putting it into the correct context of if you want this and if you're aiming to achieve this, you need money. And unfortunately, that's the thing that a lot of people don't like to talk about. The world is run by money. If you want to do certain things, you want certain things in life, you have to have money. So, my only advice would be, every chance you get, you got to give them real life examples of what you need money for and what happens when you don't have it, or once you get it and you misuse it, it's very difficult to recover it. It's very much like time, right? So the only advice I would do is keep them very busy, and in that busy schedule, make sure that 20 minutes of that day, they're having Finance 101. And eventually it will sink in. And a lot of the things you think about, and I apologize, I'm winded. I was coming up and down the stairs a few times with a child, but it does sink in. And I think another thing that you have to give yourself, which what I'm noticing, we just came from a house, my little cousin's son is there. These kids are in their mid to late 20s, and it's just sinking in.
Yep.
It's not something that's going to happen as quickly as our generation. So little by little, by example, and that's the last thing I'll leave to you. The burden is completely on you. They're going to be looking at everything that you do. So if you want them to have a positive economic outlook, you need to have a positive. If you're trying to tell them, do this, or like this thing says, do as I say, not as I do, it doesn't work. Simple as that. So unfortunately, advice coming from someone who doesn't have a child, but definitely pay attention and repetition.
I got a couple, but I'm going to let Adam go first.
All right, thanks, Ray. So first, Tom, I got a comment on your comment on the state of financial illiteracy in this country. Just a beautiful euphemism for where we're at. But I think you can also take that as a positive, right? Because if you have some financial literacy, you're already head and shoulders above most people. And the opportunity you have now with your kids at their age to instill some basic financial survival skills is just huge. So I would say that don't underestimate the capacity of your kids to absorb this stuff. And yes, it is what you do, not what you say. But when they're ready, talk about your specific examples. You don't need to go buy some book or program or other podcast other than this one, which is free. But use the examples that you have. One day, Liam may say, "Mommy, Daddy, how much does our house cost?" And get into it. And he might say, "Wow, that's a lot of money. You had a lot of money." Well, then you can explain, "Well, we borrow the money, how that gets paid back." And young kids can ask, well, how does the trust work there? What happens if you don't pay the bank back? What does the bank do? And what is the bank's interest in lending you money in the first place? And through some basic financial literacy, I had a second grader tell her teacher, well, the bank can afford to do that because they're making more interest on it by taking your money and loaning it out to somebody else at a higher interest rate. So you can get into as much level of detail as you can. And when your kid's eyes glaze over, okay, well, then you can stop. But you may be surprised at how much they can absorb, how quickly.
So I've got two examples from me, and one of them, Stern, is actually from your brother, Mark. So when their kids were very young, they created money in the house, right? So they got a jar of like colorful beads or something, I forget what it was, and they basically had a chart on the fridge, and that said, hey, if you do this chore, you get this many beads. If you do this, and then they had a separate chart that said, here are all the things you can buy with those things. Lunch with mom, lunch with dad, extra hour on the iPad, whatever it was. It had this system, right? So without using real money, they were able to teach them, if they do a little bit of work or do something right, then they could then go get things that they want. And I'm pretty sure it had negatives in too, right? If you do something wrong, you put beads back in the jar, right? So I think that was the very, very young, like 4 years old and less, way to teach them the value of working and doing the right thing and having a capability of getting what you
different
want.
than actually giving them money,
Giving them money, my guess is that when they're 2 years old or 3 years old, like colorful beads are just probably more interesting than a paper that says a 1 and a paper that has a 5 on it, right? Like I'm thinking that's the only difference. So that's one example, and your kids are right about that age. You could probably do something like that. The other thing that I started doing when Noah was young was opened up a savings account for him, like a high interest savings account, and we put money in there. And nothing regular, maybe once a month or whatever it was, I would log in and look at the account with him and show him, like, look, we put in $20 and now it's $20.03, right? Because the interest was whatever it was. But it was basically, I kept telling him it's free. It's not free money, but they're giving you this money and you didn't have to work for it, right? And there's this thing about it, like showing them the real numbers on paper, and like you can make it up in a spreadsheet and just show them nonsense. That's fine too, but we just happen to do it with a real checking account online. And that makes a big difference, right? And ever since then, he's been growing that money and using it at his own savings account for all these years. So I think that was helpful in the whole compounding interest, discussion and understanding that you can make your money work for more money, right?
I'll give you 3 more real-world examples that really appealed to my kids that I thought was very interesting for kids their age. It's like early elementary school I'm talking. One is the Baltimore Children's Museum. I don't know if you guys have been to the Inner Harbor, but if your kids are, I know you said about 4 years old, 1.5, probably in a couple of years, it'll be a pretty cool trip for you guys. They got a great aquarium. The Children's Museum, I don't know if they still have the display, but it's called Early Earl and Late Louise, and it's all about exactly what we're talking about, right? Saving early. Other children's museums we've been to in other cities in Pittsburgh and Boston, they also have similar displays, but my kids always remember the Early Earl and Late Louise. The second thing you can do is at your local bank branches. I know after COVID there aren't as many, but there's a local branch at our area in our hometown that had this children's program. Our kids loved the dinosaur banks they gave. And it made like a little dinosaur noise, and the legs that moved and the tail wagged when you put the money in. So they just loved it. So it was really enticing for the kids. And the last thing is there's a terrific board game for elementary school kids. Maybe in a few years you guys can play as a family for your game nights. It's called the Allowance Game. And it's kind of a lot of what we talked about as teaching the kids to save, teaching value, spend here, and then you don't have as much, unfortunately. So it's a pretty good board game. You can probably check it out online. So if you guys like to do that with your family, something to look out for.
Yeah, and like throw Monopoly in there too, because it actually has some real world, real estate type aspects to it, and kids can play that young. So that brings up a good point, though. We used to play Monopoly with the kids, and when they were very young, and I'm going to say 3, 4, just countable, when they could count, we would make the youngest kids be the banker, right, and make change, and not necessarily to learn about finance so much, but just to like understand how counting and math and moving, making change and stuff, like it just helps a lot. So just getting familiar with numbers is also something that's important. It just makes it all kind of fit together a little better. So, Ed, you brought up cash flow before, the board game cash flow, right?
Yeah.
You need to be older. That's a little bit older. But that was
good game though.
Right, but that game was built that game was built by. Oh yeah, the game's right there. Was produced by Robert Kiyosaki, who is a big-time real estate investor, right?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and a bunch of other books. So yes, you need to be older, but it does help a lot with the whole buying and selling and buying low and selling high and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of things you can do, but you just got to do it. And I think Johnny said it before, it's all on you, right? They're not going to learn it anywhere else.
Yeah,
Right?
and something interesting, even about the examples about like the Monopoly and stuff, something at least that I do with the girls that are close to me, my cousin's daughters, sometimes you think by just playing the game with them, they'll get it. You need to stop in that scenario. You're playing something, you're having a conversation, and you need to explain it to them. Say, see, this is a game, but this is how it relates to life. Those 15 minutes where you explain that to them, it really does stick. And the earlier, the better. One of the things that I did to them that they always remind me of, I played to them IOUSA. It's this thing about how the budget of the United States works, where all the money's going, why, they'll explain why Social Security, people think it's not going to last, blah, blah, blah.
Is it a
All that
game
stuff.
or is it a...
No, it's a
show?
it's a documentary.
Oh, yeah.
I sent it to you.
Yep.
It has a whole bunch of good people, good-minded, but I'm not promoting that video. I'm just saying, one day I sat them down, I just played it. And I was like, listen, when you see your mom using a credit card, when you see this, when you see that, all of a sudden, 10 years later, it'll come out of their mouth. Be like, yeah, I remember when you showed me that video. I would have never paid attention to it if you didn't stop and show me that. So in what you're doing, if you could just contextualize it into everyday life, don't assume they're going to do it themselves. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't.
Yeah, and last thing
Johnny,
else...
that's a great comment on stopping and showing and pausing when you need to, which
Yeah.
I think I need to do because I think I may have unintentionally misspoke earlier about mortgages. The question is, why would a bank loan money to people? And the answer is because the bank is getting the money at a lower interest rate or even a zero interest rate from depositors. And when they lend it to you, they make a profit on a portion of that interest rate that they're charging you. So I just wanted to put that out there to avoid all of the hate mail that was undoubtedly coming my way.
Absolutely.
A lot of live comments are complaining already.
And one other thing on top of what Ed said, I have another friend of mine, and I wish I had thought of this and I didn't. When his kids were young and they saved, the deal they made was, if you save money, I will match it in your account. So when you put it in, and it was an account I think that they couldn't take anything out of for some amount of years or whatever. So anytime they got money for their birthday, they might take half of it or all of it or whatever.
So what's the rules? What if they put $100 in, they want to take it out after you match it a week later?
No, he had a limit. Like you can't take it out till you're 18 or
Okay.
or something. There's some long time frame or maybe certain. I don't know the rules, but make up your own rules, right? But the bottom line was, hey, if you do this, I'll help you, right? And that was, it wasn't just you putting money away for your kids and they don't even know it and you're going to surprise them when they're 18. That's great, but they didn't learn anything.
Right.
Right.
It's
So
incentive.
it's incentive.
Yep.
One caution I'll share with you, Tom, and you and your wife may already experience this, but the children are human beings, and so every human being is different. And my wife and I are always surprised about, man, these two kids came from the same two people, yet they're so different. And their views on finances and their receptiveness to what we try to teach them on finances is no different than that aspect of life.
Yeah.
So you and your spouse may have to tweak how you're going about things with each child because each one's different, right? One will be really receptive to it, one might not be. So you have to try something a little bit different with someone. So just keep your minds and options open for that. And don't be frustrated or set back because every parent's been there.
Yeah.
Right? Every kid's different.
Yeah, and I think Ray will attest. You could have 4 kids or a bunch of kids grow up in the same house, and they are completely different.
we had 4 in our house and it's the same.
But
Exactly.
there's nothing wrong with that, right?
No, I'm not saying there
Individuality,
is, but you can't take it for granted. So you got to sort of be very proactive and reactive. When you see the one that's sort of going the wrong way, it's your job to pull them into the fold.
That's right. All right. I think we're out of examples on that one. What else you got, Tom?
Well, I got one more. In the interest of trying to do a side gig, maybe an investment property or some sort of investment, my wife and I have obviously been sacking away some money, thinking about where to go. I guess my question is, how do you guys deal with risk? When do you pull the trigger? How do you know it's right? And I know that this is probably going to get a spreadsheet little jingle or something after I stop saying it, but but it's more not so much about the math. It's more just about like literally pulling the trigger on, your nest egg and really risking, a significant investment. How do you sort of get yourself ready to do it and really pull the trigger?
Well, if
Tom,
you've already,
you had
oh, sorry, go
there,
ahead.
it's spreadsheet based, and I think Ray is one of the best at this. You got to take emotion out of it. There's always going to be emotion there, and in your spreadsheet, have a certain percentage for risk, have a percentage for the shit happens factor, and don't force the results. It might not be a good opportunity, right? Don't try to create the spreadsheet in a way that it gives you the result that you think you might want. Do it as honestly as you can. And if you do that, you got to trust the results and you got to go with it. And the absolute worst case minimum is you're going to have a great learning experience. And the best case is you're a smart guy, you did the homework, you probably surprise yourself.
I was going to say, if you've done the homework and it makes sense, then you have to trust that you've done the right thing. Now, if you're talking about an investment property, what's the worst thing that happens? You don't make as much money on rent as you thought, and you're not losing money as much as you're just not making a whole lot of money, or maybe they're still paying your rent or whatever, or your mortgage, but you're going to maybe lose $5,000 a year because you're not getting as much money out of it as you thought. Now, if you want to do something, take this money, go start a restaurant, well, yeah, then you could lose all of it. But what's the worst case thing that's going to happen if you do what you want to do? Are you going to lose all your money, or are you just going to take a little longer maybe before you start making money?
Yeah, I would agree, and I was thinking the same thing. Buying options on the stock market, you could lose all your money. Opening a restaurant, you're going to have to throw in a ton of cash in the beginning, and you could lose it all if it goes out of business. There's a lot of risk there, right? Buying a real estate investment trust, putting money in the stock market, buying real estate, you're probably not going to lose all your money, right? Like those are the lower risk sides of the thing. And, we found, like we didn't buy our first investment property for about 7 or more years after we started looking, right? Because we happened to be looking before the real estate crash and nothing made sense because the spreadsheet, anybody?
Oh.
Okay. The spreadsheet just kept turning red, right, and saying it's not the right time, right? So when it finally got closer to green, is when we bought our first property, and it was just a matter of patience. And the good thing about the patience part is that you're just building up more availability of cash or investment opportunities through that time, right? So if you look back, you could say, oh, it seemed lucky you were able to buy that thing at that time, but it was really being prepared and for the opportunity to come, because it will always come, right? So that's what I think, right? So I think, look, there's plenty of ways to do real estate, and some of them are completely hands off, right? And we've bought a condo hotel that's completely hands off, and it's one of the greatest ones. And if you're a busy working guy and your wife's busy and you got 2 young kids, like that's probably one of the better things to do. That, or just a plain old REIT in your investment account. Those are the ways to do it without really impacting your day-to-day life. So we could talk more about condo hotels either today or some other day, but it's really a hands-off real estate play, and it's really great. And Adam's done the same thing in the same building. We both bought one in Myrtle Beach, and actually Adam's bought 2, right? So
Different places.
yeah. So those are the kind of things that I would think about. And Gary's right. If you do the things that you're not going to lose at all, then you will feel a lot more easy about the minimal risk that's involved. And you could not make money the first couple of years. You could break even the first couple of years, right? But if you've done the right thing and you did your homework, it'll probably work out in the future.
And look, we're also talking about, even if the cash flow month to month doesn't work, you've got the underlying asset that's going to appreciate. Is a piece of real estate now going to be worth more in 10 years? Probably. More in 15 years? Probably. You're going to be able to raise the rent each year along the way? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and look, there will be downs. Real estate does go down, like 2008. It's gonna, so you can't bank on the equity in any certain amount of time, but at some point it will be there. Is usually how it works, unless we have Armageddon in the markets. But I think that it sounds like the general consensus is,
I think the only thing I can add to Springboard, they've touched on all of them, but you need to go by the risk that you're comfortable with, but also, let's use the example of real estate. You should be in a section of real estate that you understand, that you could appreciate any ramifications, right? Because if you look at what Ray just said on the condos, we don't have the, I guess we don't have the example of the people who owned it right when COVID started. Right? They lock these places down. You have cash flow issues. So you need to know all the scenarios associated with all the different types of investing. So I'll give you my last example. My first was a 3-family home, but I knew it well. My father had a 2-family. I work and I live in a town that is all multi-families. I knew all the nuances about it. So it'd be a big difference if I go and buy, some building in Manhattan, which I know nothing about, right? So you want to keep the investment something that you're either going to do all the research and feel comfortable with, or you have resources that you could go ask questions. But I would really hesitate to start just something out of the blue that you're not familiar with and not comfortable with. So real estate in your neck of the woods, not some people don't like that phrase, so I apologize. But in your area, are you comfortable with it? Do you understand it? Is it an option? And these are the things that you should be asking yourself, so that if it's not on the list, then you got to start making a list of the stuff that you would feel comfortable participating in. Because I've talked to a lot of people who are at your stage and they chose something that was completely off from their personality, from their ability. And then 5 years later, I talked to them, it was usually a negative story afterward. You got to pick something you're comfortable with, or if you're not comfortable or you're not abreast with any of the options, just make sure you do your due diligence and really get comfortable with what you're getting into. And usually research, conversations with people who already done it will take care of 85% of that. But, do it cautiously, but do it with the understanding on what you're trying to achieve and what you're comfortable with.
So let's give
I might also say, if you buy locally in your neighborhood and you're relatively handy, somewhat handy, you got a big leg up, because who knows, you may be able to avoid paying an electrician $300-400 because there's a simple breaker needs to be reset or something silly. Being handy helps, but you also don't want to make that your career.
Right.
Call experts when needed.
One thing I'll throw in there, Tom, kind of piggybacking what Adam and Johnny just said. Johnny had mentioned you got to be comfortable, with what you do, and I absolutely agree with that. And Adam mentioned about being handy. Your kids are pretty young. I'm not sure what your plans are, but maybe you're planning on doing some coaching and hanging out with them. Whatever groups or events they're in, and maybe your wife as well. I personally was not that handy. So if you're interested in something a little more hands off, and obviously you're not going to have the equity in it, but Vanguard, I like their website. I find it very friendly. They have a real estate fund. So obviously not going to have equity because you don't own the property, but it's actually large scale residential apartment buildings and also commercial real estate that fund invests in. So if that's something that might be more your speed, you can check it out at Vanguard.com.
Yep. And some of those, I don't know about that one, but some of the larger REITs, they give you dividends monthly, not yearly, because that's how the rent roll is. So that's another option.
So let's list out, just to give like real examples, right? So there's ETFs and mutual funds, which I just described. Johnny's describing REITs. So there's a bunch of companies out there that do real estate investment trusts slightly different, right? So they go out and they say, like, we're going to build this medical arts building. We're going to rent it out for 5 years, and then we're going to sell it, right? And they take investment money from people like us. You put in $10,000 or $20,000, you buy shares basically in a building, and then you get the dividends from that. And then when they sell it, you make any proceeds, right? But you're kind of locked in for 5, 7, 10 years, depending on what's going on with their construction projects and how it goes. But it's another hands-off way to do it. It's a little more tied down than what Ed just described, because with any kind of fund, Vanguard, anybody, you can sell it and buy it anytime you want. These are a little more locked down, but theoretically, you have the equity piece that's missing from a regular REIT, right? So there's that. We've had Gary's done the local thing, right? He bought a place local, right? Relatively local to where you live.
House me?
Yeah, your
Yes,
house.
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So he bought a house local from his dad, and it's a 2-family, right?
Yes.
So you got 2 renters in there. Johnny bought the 3-family he just described, local, and he knows the economy and everything that's going on. You also bought the place in Georgia?
Correct. And it's a good example of, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to take care of it myself, that is completely taken care of by a property management. And that's the example of the same thing, just zero input. I'm going to go a step further, which most people don't believe us. but we have never stepped foot in that house. And I've only been in the cul-de-sac looking at it from far away, about 30 feet away from it. I didn't go for the closing, did absolutely nothing. And I've had it since 2007 with the same people living in it. So go figure.
That's
It's a one
impressive.
family.
That's good.
Yeah, it's a one-family home.
And you bought it brand new. They were
Brand spanking
selling
new,
it.
pre-construction. And another interesting thing, which the deal with the property management was, they were the ones who were funding the build. So if you bought it at pre-construction, they locked you in at 5% of the fee,
Whoa.
which is very low. So, you know, these are different things, like what you were saying. There's risks associated with stepping out and taking your nest egg. But if you do the research and you see what's happening, you know, so, you know, these guys know I'm not a fan of Excel, in the sense of, it's not what's going to make my decision 100%. But I do know how to use it. And it was one of those things where all I did was pick the best location, which I thought would grow. It was way up in the sticks, even 29 miles from Atlanta. And then what happened? They put an express lane on the main highway, and it passes right by the neighborhood. It doubled. So, you know, it's
the
little
Sticks
things.
is like a suburb of the neck of the woods.
Yeah, yeah.
I got.
And
Has your rent gone up a lot since then, though? If it's the same person,
It's the same, you know, $35 a year, you know, that
They
kind of
increase
thing.
it, right?
Increase it every time.
Where
They're
are the boonies?
older retired people. They were working when they started, but they retired while they were there, and they're happy. You know, they even put their own fence in the backyard, and at no cost to me. But the point that I'm trying to make is, you have the experience of someone who decided to do it in their backyard because they knew they could support it, right? And then I was willing to take a little bit loss of money only because it financially made sense, and I just knew I wasn't going to be able to be calling people all the way over there.
5% is not a lot.
It's nothing. So
Usually about 12.
yeah, 12, 10, 8 the hour. But, you know, two examples, they both work. But more importantly, you know, you should have a pie of all the available investments, but really pay attention to the leverage associated with real estate. Because there's different levels. Once you have this real estate, once you have it rented, there's a million things you could be doing with that. Like, you could be refinancing, you could take the money out and reinvest that and keep going. So it's really how much you feel comfortable. But as long as it's rock solid from the get-go, then you have those options.
That's right. So for me, we've done vacation properties, right, that we manage, right, which is a lot of work. We've got the condo hotel, which is zero work. And we've got a couple of properties that are in a retirement community in Florida that are in between, right? They take a little bit of work, but we have people down there that do it for us, but you've got to call them, and, you know, it's not like a hotel where they just do it on their own. And we've got to find the tenants, but they're usually a month or 2 or 3 months, you know, so it's not constant turnover, right? So we've done all those. Plus, I bought my parents' house many years ago and had long-term tenants in there. And to me, that was the least enjoyable experience. You know, and some people do it and they're great with it, but I wasn't. You know, we just didn't do great with it. So we've shied away from long-term tenants since then.
And you might want to, I think it's not that you have to explain it, but you realize there's like the 3-family, that's a long term. You're getting a lease, someone's being in that apartment for a very long time, but yet his ones in Arrowhead are just people doing a long weekend, a week.
The vacation
You
properties,
should
yeah.
be able to distinguish which one of those you want it to be.
Right, and the harder ones are going to be more, right? So they're more profitable when you do short-term rentals, but they're more work, right? So again, if Tom, the question you're asking about, you know, in your current busy life, you probably want to go for the less work to begin with.
Yeah, definitely agree.
So Adam, do you want to jump in with the examples of what you've got before we close it up?
Yeah, sure. So I started with a few townhomes within my same zip code, reasonably handy. And I found that a lot of the horror stories about bad tenants, you know, either I've been lucky or they're just overblown. Haven't had much issue. My strategy was always to rent a little bit under market value, so I get enough applicants so that I can pull their FICO scores, and you get a 720, you're in. And I don't know if it would have been different had I not run credit checks, but have not had a problem with good properties and good tenants. Also regarding the condo hotels, now I'm at the advanced elderly AARP age of 52 and a half. I do appreciate the condo hotel approach where there really is nothing to do. They take 40% of the top line revenue, which seems egregious, unfair, ridiculous. But at the end of the day, what is that covering? Well, I don't have to do anything, and the numbers still work. The spreadsheet still turns green. So let them have their 40%.
That's right. They do everything. They book the rooms. They check people in. They clean the rooms. They do everything. So it's been great.
That's passive income.
That's true passive income.
True.
That's right. Tom, does that answer the question?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. It's a lot of different perspectives, but I appreciate the thoughts because it is. I feel like it is the next step. I've heard you guys say before, like, the 9 to 5 is great. You got to do something on the side too. You got to have some sort of side investment. So I've really taken that to heart. So that's really where my head is at. It's like, where do we go?
That's
We
great.
still need time, but we're gonna get there.
That's a big message of ours, right? What do you hear about when you're contributing to your 401k? Diversity. You got to have international funds, bonds, stocks, metals, whatever. Well, what kind of diversity is it if your paycheck is just coming from a single company, right? So this just ties into that as well. Multiple streams of income, critical.
That's right. Okay. That's the end of your list, right, Tom?
Yeah.
So one thing I did wanted to bring up here was that you guys see Tom's background, or you see where Tom is located, right? Do you want to give us a description of where you are, Tom?
Sure. So when we found out that my wife was pregnant with my daughter, it was during COVID. I was working from home, and we only have 3 bedrooms. So I said, all right, I got to renovate my shed. So I'm actually in a small prefabricated shed. It's about 15 by 18, something like that. It's half storage, as you can see over here, and then half workplace.
I was
So,
trying to figure
this
out
is-
where he was.
Do you have air conditioning and heat in there?
So I'm surprised you guys can't hear it, but I do have my air conditioner going over there. Ray actually told me to not put it in the window right in front of me because it'd be too noisy, but it's got a couple of like double hung windows. And then for heat, this is my clean the pan over here. It's a small wall mounted wood burning stove. So it's like a 12 by 12 cube that I had to cut a hole through the ceiling. You probably see my poor spackle jobs over here, but yeah, so I use this thing. It'll get this even in winter up to like almost 80 degrees if I keep feeding it wood. So it's really cool, and it has a cool like heat deflector. So this whole thing is designed to be wall mounted. It's just plywood behind here, and yeah, it works great. Cubic mini wood stoves, I think it's called, but great.
Tom,
Love
that's
it.
awesome. And look, you're obviously handy. There may be some really good opportunities in real estate coming up in your neck of the woods, whether that's out in the sticks or in the boonies. Be prepared for it. Do your homework now so that you're ready to pull the trigger when the opportunity.
You could do small homes,
Tiny home.
tiny homes.
When the spreadsheet flashes green. But I'll tell you what else. You had me completely won over when you panned around and I saw the Steelers swag. I believe in gold too, baby. Here we go, Steelers.
I'm a Steelers fan, I guess, retrospectively, only in the last couple of years, but yeah, we love it. We went to see a Farm Aid. We went to the Farm Aid concert in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, and then we went and went to the home opener, and then after that, I was like, forget it. I'm done with New York football teams. I'm a Steelers fan now. So
Oh, convert. All right. Welcome aboard.
Very cool. All right. Anybody add anything else for Tom?
Nope. I just want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, man.
I'm happy to do it, man. Thanks for having me.
And we can always say you were the first live guest for us. So you.
And not one swear. Should we throw one in just to?
I think there was one somewhere.
You did.
Me?
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd do that.
Yeah. So Tom, I have a question for you. So,
Was.
from an outside perspective, what is your thoughts of this podcast?
So I really like it. It's interesting now because I always listen to it on the train on my way to work. It's interesting seeing you guys because it's putting faces with with voices,
Who's
which
the
is
most
really
handsome?
interesting. But yeah, exactly. But no, I think you guys have a really great dynamic. I think the topics are very interesting. I think it's cool. I promote it quite a bit at our at Ray's former place of employment too. Everybody always asks me like, "Oh, you talked to Ray?" I'm like, "Yeah, check it out. AddictstaticPod.com. Check it out."
Thanks for the support.
Awesome.
No, you guys keep going. It'll be you'll be the next Joe Rogan one day. Who knows?
It's important though.
We won't. We're
you're
not allowed
on-
to be off color.
Yeah, but he's on the hook because now, either a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, I'm gonna tell Ray, wait, we want him back on the show. We want to see what he did, where'd he go. So we're gonna hold you to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds
Yeah,
good, man.
guys, I don't know if we want to put a wager on this, but I'm thinking Tom's going to be wildly successful in the
already is.
future. Not necessarily all because of this podcast, but
90%.
you
We'll
know,
take credit.
90% at least.
That's right. All right, everybody. I think that's a wrap for today. Tom, thanks again. And we'll be talking soon.
All right, buddy.
Take
All
care,
right.
Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoy the rest of your night.
Go Steelers.
Bye.
Were we actually live? Wait, Ed, I can't hear you anymore. Oh, I guess I'm disconnected. Can't hear.